Emotional competence, I would say, is a skill and it's also a process. The child is crying. The mother starts to laugh. If the child throws a tantrum and if the child disagrees and says that no, I want to go in, then it's about how you would deal with that situation. I'd like to begin by defining emotional competence. So emotional competence has been defined by in various ways. As we all know, to be emotionally competent would be to uh, express emotions effectively, to be able to understand emotions, one's own emotions and emotions in social context, and also be able to regulate emotions in ways that can help children attain their goals, which would be basically to adjust to the demands in the environment, or which would be to attain, some desirable outcome. So that's how we would generally define emotional competence. Now, I'm sure you all are aware of various terms. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about emotion regulation as such, as a skill. Now, emotional competence, I would say, is a skill and it's also a process. Uh, so when I say it's a skill, it means that there are a set of behavioral strategies, or there are certain expressions or ways in which an emotionally competent child or an individual would behave. When I say process, means that there is a trajectory. Uh, there's a way in which a child or an individual would develop emotional competence. It's not something that just takes place, in one go. It's a process. It's a developmental process. Since we're talking about children here, I'm sure we'd be able to appreciate the fact that it's developmental in nature. So, core components of emotional competence, when we define it in that way, would be to be emotionally aware, to be able to express emotions in ways that are compatible with the culture, with the display rules of a particular culture. Say, for instance, if it is at home, the child is able, I will be referring to the child very often. So we're talking about children. So if the child is able to express her or his emotions in ways that are compatible to the rules or to the, we would call them display rules, or to the norms that are prevalent in the home context, then yeah, the child is able to do it well, we would say. Emotional expression does not take place in homes alone, because there are other contexts in which the child engages. So display rules could be different in different contexts. So if the child is able to express emotions in ways that are compatible to whichever context that the child is in, then we would call the child, being emotionally competent. The I would say probably the in when we talk emotional development or emotional competence, I think one of the core, or one of the, maybe you could call it also as an outcome of being emotionally competent, because that's what we would finally look at, which is in the ability to regulate one's emotion. So there are studies that talk about emotional emotion itself is emotionally regulated. But let's look at emotion regulation as the ability to be able to adjust one's expression of emotion to meet needs that one is experiencing, and also the demands of the situation. So that is how we would like to define. These are some of the core components. So I'd like to begin with us thinking or reflecting on these two key questions. Since we are here to talk about how we can nurture emotional competence, or how, I'm sure all of us, some of us, I mean, all of us probably are parents, and some of us are parents, some of us are educators or school teachers, or people who engage or interact with children very often. So, my question is, how much of a child's emotional competence is innate? How much of it is is it given? How much of it is natural? how much of the child's emotional capacities are contributed by the environment. Let's take a moment and reflect on this. I'm told I would not be. Uh, yeah, so what do you think? I see, can the participants type?
Yes, ma'am, they can respond in the chat box.
Yeah. Okay, I'm told there are some 100 plus participants.
Yeah, it's 188 now.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I think all of us can respond. I mean, how much of the child's emotional competence is a given fact? How much,
Yeah,
are
Lakshmi
children
Iyer
born,
has responded. Yeah, Lakshmi Iyer has responded as partially innate and partially contributed by the environment. Contributed by environment by our editor. Yeah.
Thank you,
With
Lakshmi.
more responses to come. Innate plus mostly
I think as
environment.
you were thinking, yeah, okay, yeah. As you are thinking, also like you to think about how you might have changed, as an individual. Emotional capacities have changed. Have they changed? I mean, are you the same person now when compared to the person you were, say, when you were 18 years old? Say suppose, or 5 years back, how was your capacity to be, to emotionally relate to people, to be aware of emotions, your inner emotional states, or even emotional states in others. Has it changed?
Yes, ma'am. Many have answered that they've changed, and
Yes.
no, we have changed over the years in emotional capacity.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So now I think some of you as parents, you'll be able to relate to this question. I'm sure children who are very young, when your children, say when they're 2 years old, to compare it to when they are say 5 years old or when they're 10 years old, I'm sure there's a lot of change that's taking place in your children. So yes, certain capacities, as somebody had responded, certain capacities or certain aspects of emotional competence lay very strong in biological factors. But that does not mean that there's no scope for us to intervene. Then we wouldn't be having a session of this sort. Yeah. So much of it is contributed by the environment. How I would like to begin by saying is that emotions, in fact, or emotional development takes place in the relational context. If you look at how we experience emotions, they're usually in a relational context. They're usually to meet goals or to adjust to certain demands in the relational context. It could be evaluating a particular context, say, for instance, a child who throws a tantrum or a child who wants something from the parent. Gets a response from the parent. It could be either a yes or a no, and the child experiences an emotion based on how the child evaluates the response or the reaction from the context. So, which means now, if you look at any such any emotion for that matter, you could relate it to a relational theme. That's what certain theorists say, that emotions are embedded in relational context. Almost every emotion has a relational theme. So, to take or to take out the child and separate the context from the child while you're trying to understand emotional development, or the development of emotionally, all those skills that we were talking about is meaningless. It wouldn't really make much sense. Okay? So yes, there is a lot of innate or inherent capacities or inherent contributions or biological contributions to the child's emotional competence or the emotional competent profile that the child has. In fact, there are individual differences too. All of us are not the same. All children are not the same. I'm sure even teachers would vouch for this. No child in a class of 30 would react to your to your ways of teaching in a similar way, even if it's a fun activity that you're introducing, or if it's a test that you have announced. Children don't react or respond to your any of these in similar ways. The same way, I think I'm sure even parents would relate to the fact that even when you have two children at home, your child one would not respond in ways which are similar to child two's responses. So children are different. So what I would be doing is I would be let's look at how or what contributes to the individual difference in among children. So the innate part or the biological part is what I would be focusing on. Before that, I'd like you to look at this scenario. Okay, let's imagine that you're the parent and you have served your child some snack, maybe it's for breakfast, and very visibly you could, I'm sure you can understand that the child says does not like to have that and starts to cry. So she says she doesn't want to have it and she starts to cry. What would be your response as a parent? What would be a typical response? Let's talk about typical Indian parent. Remember, this probably, let's imagine this is breakfast time. It's time to go to school. You're getting ready to go for work. It's a healthy snack that you have made. Probably you have prepared the child for it. It's something that we regularly have at home, and that's the scenario. I'm sure this is not unfamiliar, right?
Yeah.
At
Libin
least
Philip
for
has
parents who
responded
have.
that we'll be angry, scolding,
Okay.
ask the
Okay.
child what is troubling her and try to console.
Okay.
You must eat it, I will say. Will make her try to understand, ask the reason, try to find out why the child doesn't want to eat it.
Okay. Is that all?
Yeah, Bindu Mol has
Okay. To
answered,
me,
ask the reason.
sorry.
Ask the reason.
As the reason. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just take you through a few options. So maybe it would be easier for you to. You look at this option. So let's assume that's the mother who's responding, who's the first respondent here. So as you can see, the mother is, as one of you said, the mother is scolding the child, right? Is reprimanding, is saying, well, what is wrong with you? It's very evident from how she's pointing fingers. That's A. And from B, see the mother seems to be force feeding the child, right? I want you to eat it right now. Stop crying and eat this. This is what the mother says. You see option C? The child keeps crying. The child probably doesn't want to eat, says, no, I'm not going to eat it. So it's not just scolding, but probably also using a physical kind of a response there. You look at this is a very typical response. Are we familiar with this response? The child stops, the child cries, the child stops to eat, says, I don't want to eat it. Child stops crying also probably, and then goes to the mother. She says, Amma, I don't want this. And look at the mother's response. The mother is ignoring the child. Is this something that we do often? It's a very typical Indian response. Are we familiar with this?
Yes, there are responses like yes, mother poses, ignoring, option D.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And look at this. Isn't this a typical response again? Is this something that we very often see mothers or parents doing? The child is crying. And the mother starts to laugh and says that, how silly is that? I think South Indians can relate to this. Aye, you're crying. Look at you. You're being so silly. Right? And look at this. Is this another response? Here, the mother is trying to console the child, is trying to hug the child, It's trying to make her comfortable, right? Yeah. So if I quickly take you through A, B, C, D, E. A, you have the mother scolding the child. B, force feeding. C, beating. D, ignoring. E, laughing or minimizing. And F, consoling or being, warm, or, hugging the child, asking the child, saying it's okay, don't cry. So from these responses, what do you think? Which child or in which context do you think the child would be emotionally competent, or where is the chance of the child being emotionally competent? Which of these responses would contribute to it? Is it A, B, C, D, E, F? We were talking about contributions from the environment, right? So which of these responses would contribute to the development of an emotionally competent child?
Everybody's answering F. F is the best way. Bindumol has answered E. Chitra has answered
Okay.
F. Yeah.
Okay.
Lily has answered F.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. To all of you who have answered F, now the question is, my next question is it going to be easy for us to do this? Remember, I told you we are, running short of time. The child has to be fed. Probably the school bus is waiting, or the school bus is going to come now. Maybe we need to go for work. So, is this possible?
No. Ramya has answered no. Lipin has answered it's not easy. Chitra has answered no.
Okay.
Raji has
Okay.
answered no.
Okay. Yeah.
Not
So,
always.
okay. Yeah. So I think at least by the end of the presentation, I'd like all of us to acknowledge the fact that yes, this is not going to be easy, but it's not impossible. That's what we're talking about. That's precisely what we're talking about in this session, about how can we actually be attuned to our child's needs. Be attuned to the child's needs, not help or not, build manipulative skills in the child, be warm towards the child, at the same time set boundaries for the child, help the child to problem solve, help the child to make right decisions, also help the child to learn set of skills that would contribute to what we call emotion regulation. Okay? So that's what we would be talking about. So let's keep that in mind. Now, I'd like us to focus on what contributes to individual differences, like as the question that I asked earlier about the innate contributions or the biological contributions towards emotional competence. The way we are now, if you just think of yourselves, think of how you have developed as a person, how you have been handling emotions, say very common emotions like anger, sadness, or even for that matter, when you are frustrated, was it different from the way your friends would behave, or what was it different from the way your friends would deal with those emotions? So I'm sure you have come across this idea that we are all different. So what contributes to this difference? So the point is that we're talking about every child has a unique temperament. I'm sure you're familiar with this term called temperament. It actually in psychology, when we say temperament, it's basically the biological aspect of how a child or how an individual behaves, how an individual feels, how an individual is able to regulate oneself. It's the stylistic aspects of your personality. That is what is temperament. And behavioral scientists say that the foundations for temperament is laid very early in life. When you are born, or sometimes even before birth, these foundations are laid. So, and temperament actually contributes to how children would react to their environment, how they would form their relationships, and how they would develop any sort of self-regulation, be it in the area of emotions or even behavioral self-regulation. So temperament has goes a long way in contributing or determining how a child would develop as a person. So in general, I mean, if you look at temperament as a term, it would help us to. It's actually a tool that will help us to understand children. At the very superficial sense, it helps us to understand why a child is very sociable, A child is very, is very confident, has no qualms, talking to strangers. If it's for instance, if it's in a classroom, you ask a question, and you see some of them, they raise their hands and they start answering. Some of them are so friendly towards you. Whereas, you could be a very friendly teacher, but, there are some children who would shy away, who would be very withdrawn, who would be scared of you, even though, you aren't that intimidating. So it helps us understand why children are different. Now, temperament, in a very strict sense, if you look at it, it is actually defined as biological markers of personality traits. It influences, as I said, how children experience and regulate emotions. Uh, so now, why do we talk about temperament here? Uh, in the field of emotional development, or in the field of developmental psychology, scientists believe, or behavioral scientists have spoken about, why it is important for parents to, or people who are engaging with children, to be able to, how important is it for them to understand temperamental differences and to respond in ways that match the children's temperament. So they talk about goodness of fit, which is very important. So certain factors which are biologically given and laid already in the past cannot be changed in the child. But then as the child's capacities are developing, as the child is growing, as the child is maturing, now even if you look at it at the brain level, the child's brain is developing still. It's work in progress. So how you respond, or how parents, educators respond to children would actually would actually change the course of how children would develop emotionally, or in fact in all their domains. And now if when we talk about emotional development, it also has implications for other domains, like for instance academic domain, or even their overall achievement, etc. could be most significantly, it's the social development. When we talk about emotional development, we also talk about social development, because if you're successfully able to handle emotions, you are able to form healthier relationships. You are able to see you are accepted more, right, in the social context. So most of these things are interrelated. So now let's look at how or why, or what are some of the components of temperament. Now, I don't want to go into too many of the details, but then if you look at the left side of the table, you look at extroversion. That is a factor of temperament. There's negative affectivity, which is negative emotionality, and then there is also effortful control. Okay, these are some of the factors. Now there are certain models in temperament literature. Maybe you could go back and refer to that. So they are very prominent models. So I've taken these points from there. So see, if you look at the right side, children are not the same in terms of activity levels, in terms of, as I told you, in terms of their social ways of social relating. Also, how forthcoming they are in social settings. So we know that children are different in that particular dimension. We also know that we are different, or children are different in the way they experience negative emotions, whether it's the intensity, or whether it is, how often they experience these emotions. So we call it proneness to experience negative emotions. The third one probably is a little bit, unfamiliar to you, but then at least, I'm sure you would know what it is. Even your capacity to focus your attention, your capacity to inhibit responses, your capacity to experience pleasure, or even boredom sensitivity, etc., are also contributed by temperament. So children are not the same on these dimensions. So in fact, children who have effortful control, something is a dimension that actually you would see at a little later stage. So maybe when children start going to school, say maybe at 5, 6 years of age, you would start seeing these differences across this particular dimension. But then when you look at the sociability and negative affectivity components, they develop very early, at a very early age. Now, there's another model that talks about activity level, approach, adaptability, intensity of reaction, quality of mode, distractibility, attention span, persistence. See, these are ways in which, or these are tools that will actually help us to look at our children, in ways that, in fact, you could also define or differentiate between children across these dimensions. Now, why is it important when we talk about temperament, when we talk about emotional development or emotional competence? Why is it important to consider temperament? Is because, as I told you, it's important that we match our ways of responding to the child, with the child's temperament. And if that is done, then the child is able to, in fact, all children, despite these differences, they are able to handle demands from the environment, develop a set of skills which would be again different. A child who is shy, who is withdrawn by nature, you wouldn't see that child, being the center of a party or so. But but still, you could see her being able to successfully navigate emotional demands, social expectations. Also, you could see if you're able to match, the way you would respond to a child who's very peculiarly, who's very angry, who's aggressive, who has his acting out tendencies. If you're able to match the way you respond to that child, the child also would be able to come out resilient. Okay? So it's about the opportunities you provide in the environment, how much suited it is to the child's temperament or the child's basic traits. That's what we talk about. I mean, that's what we mean by saying goodness of fit. So now, if you look at this table, now if you look at a child who has high activity level, now, if you provide such a child with opportunities for movement, for much more play activities, if the child is allowed to move and go around and run around, and of course under supervision, then the child would be much more engaged. If it's a classroom setting, a child who has a high activity level, if the child is actually made to do activities, is actually made to do assignments and not just sit there in the seat, that child would be much more engaged in learning. Now, if you look at a child who is slightly shy, who's restricted in her reactions, now if you ask her to, push her into too much of social activity, maybe she would become much more withdrawn. But for such a child, it would be easier for her to express herself. When the interactions with her are much more gentle, when they are much more consistent to her needs, then you would see that she would experience a sense of emotional security, and she's able to also express herself. So now those were examples of good fit. Now think of a poor fit example. Now, if you think of that, if I take you back to that example of the child saying no to the food, now suppose if it's a child who gets easily distressed, and if it's the caregiver, it's the parent, who's trying to scold her or force feed her, definitely that's going to lead to a tantrum, and there's going to be the outcome is going to be really bad for both the caregiver and the child. So so that's one example. Now, if you think of children who are highly distractible, children who seem to be very impulsive, who seem to be naturally very, who aren't able to focus. Not talking about ADHD or per se, but then it's about children who are not able to focus attention for a long time on a particular task, or who get distracted very easily. Such a child, in fact, if he or she is put into a highly structured or rigid setting where one has to follow rules, and there's extremely punitive, and the child is not given any sort of freedom to move around, then definitely that's going to affect the child's performance. So it's important that when we look at uh, you know uh, emotional competence or emotional development or social development, it needs to be in tune with the child's needs. The child's needs are mostly they can be defined by there are different ways you can define it, but child's temperament is a factor that we need to consider, especially when we're looking at dealing with children's difficult emotions, especially when we are dealing with groups, for instance, teachers, classroom settings. It becomes very important that you say if you're looking at a group of 30 children or 30 odd children, then it's at least important to know how many of your children are the high activity level types? How many of them are the slow to warm up types? How many of them are the extremely sensitive or, very prone to getting upset easily, etc. So it's important that you plan your classrooms and how you, even whether it's teaching, learning, or your other kind of engagements with the students are going to be, they need to be informed by this idea of individual differences. I'm sure this concept is not new to a lot of you, especially I'm sure if there are educators here, I'm sure you've heard some of these concepts in previous sessions too. Now, yeah, so that's the implications. I think we've already spoken about this. See, yeah, it's not just that, when we look at temperament, it's not just looking at the negative aspects or the difficult aspects of challenges. If you look at temperament, we would also be focusing on children's strengths. Yeah, so a child who probably is a little inhibited, a child who's shy, could be probably good at focusing on a particular task for a long time. Maybe the persistence that the child has, maybe the attentional focusing that the child has probably is great. Okay, or a child who's really who's aggressive or who's prone to getting angry or prone to getting frustrated easily. Probably when given certain kinds of tasks, maybe is able to focus attention. So when you use temperament as a tool in trying to understand individual differences, then it gives you a wide variety, it gives you a range of domains or range of dimensions that will help you to understand or identify both strengths or assets and challenges that the child is experiencing, so that the knowledge that you have about these could actually help you in tailoring how you would respond to the child. Okay, so which means there is no one size fits all kind of a technique or strategy when you're trying to develop emotional competence, or trying to help children develop some of these emotional or social skills. Okay, and also if you're able to match your ways of responding to the child's temperament, then you go a long way in actually developing resilience also in children, because some of the, as we saw now, children who are prone to negative emotions, when you provide them with positive experiences in their in terms of being warm, being consistent, not being very punitive or dismissive about their emotions, then in fact even they are able to come out of it, they're able to be resilient, they're able to be much more calmer, they're able to deal with their negative emotions in a much healthier way. Okay? Now, the second part of the question as to how much is contributed by the environment. I'm sure we are all aware of what I'm sure we are aware of the theories that are there, and the environmental influences on child's development. Here again, I'd like us to focus on a particular concept which is called socialization of emotions. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's actually a group of concepts put together in the developmental psychology field. It talks about it's the process through which we, as parents or educators, we are able to socialize children or help them learn about how they can understand their own emotions, express their emotions, and regulate them. And it is done consistently through the interactions that children have, with you. Okay, so I would just quickly go through these three aspects. Now, how children learn emotional responses, or how the environment contributes to children's emotional development, is by these three modes. Okay, to put it in a very simple way, one is through modeling. I'm sure we are all very familiar with that. Children learn what they see, right? So children learn emotional responses by observing how parents express and manage their own emotions. So, say for instance, a child who seems to be very angry, who seems to be very, frustrated and very difficult to handle in a classroom setting, you trace it back, and you would see that maybe she comes from a home where most of the adults that the child engages with, or at least one significant person who actually is a person who is, usually a very angry or who has a bad temper. Okay, so that's a very strong influence. learn by observing. Children learn by observing, as in you model, right? Children, parents model to them, ways of responding. So whether it's how you understand emotions, whether how you deal with emotions, or how you regulate your emotions. If it's anger, how do you actually, what do you do? Do you throw things? Do you bang doors? Do you, raise your voice, or do you just go and sit silently, just avoid the situation? All these you would see that, even in our daily examples, I'm sure if you just reflect back, children would model on adults. That's the first mode. The second one is, this is relatively new. The last 2 points are, in fact, new, at least to some of you. How parents respond to children's emotions. Now, that's a very strong, that has a very strong implication as to how children would understand their emotions, as to how children would feel validated, as to how children would also learn to regulate their emotions. There are different ways in which parents would respond. Now, that was the activity that we did. Uh, Generally, we could classify them into supportive and non-supportive responses. So the supportive responses are ones which would include comforting the child, validating the child, helping the child to emotionally express the whatever the emotion that the child is experiencing, helping the child to verbalize her emotion. And the non-supportive emotions are, I mean, non-supportive reactions are mostly the dismissive ones, the punitive ones, the minimizing ones, where we say, that's such a silly response. That's so silly of you to be crying right now. And now, if you raise your voice, one more time you raise your voice, you're not going to get your dessert is going to be cancelled, or you will not be able to watch your favorite show. That's a very punitive response. Yes. So responses could be supportive or non-supportive, and as expected, parents who consistently respond to. See, we would be using a mix of supportive and non-supportive responses. It's not about being the perfect parent. I'm sure all of us, in our daily experiences, it's not that we would be completely using only supportive responses. But then parents who tend to use consistently, who tend to use supportive responses, who they seem to provide a much more safe and comforting kind of a space for children to, which allows children to experience and express their emotions in much more validating ways and much more non-threatening ways. And they learn that, it's safe to feel emotions. It's safe to express emotions. And thereby they would also learn different ways or effective ways to manage them. Okay. The third part, the third mode, I would say, would be how, it's through discussions about emotions. Now, it's more to do with more than, I think the first two would be more like at a micro level. The third would be more of a overview, or it's more like the context. Uh, uh, Usually, I think in Indian families, I think we don't really, even research evidence says that we don't really talk much about emotions. We don't. Of course, now the trend is very different. Now, I think new gen parents seem to be much more adept at emotional vocabulary. They tend to use emotion words, but then the idea is, if you're able to talk to children or teach children about emotions. Uh, Very vocally, asking them, guiding them through situations, helping them to label emotions, or even explaining to them, how exactly you should express, or what is the right way of expressing, what is the right way of feeling. Now, if somebody comes to you, if a child comes to the mother and says that, today my friend did not speak to me. She seemed to neglect me, and she had other friends. She was not even sitting next to me. She usually sits next to me, but today she went and sat on another bench, and I was feeling so sad. A child comes to you and says that. Uh, talking to a child, a parent who, this is called emotion coaching. So, a parent who does emotion coaching would typically talk the child, I mean, through the entire, the experience, help the child to vocalize what exactly the child is feeling, help the child to verbalize her feelings, also help, build in child, in the child, alternate ways of understanding the situation, and, accept, and thereby, also helps in problem solving, also helps in understanding social context, take, perspective, etc., which all comes in the, under the umbrella term of emotional competence. So these are three ways in which the environmental contributions to emotional competence takes place. One is through modeling, two is through your reactions to your child's emotion or emotional displays, and three would be to by discussing about emotions. So when we talk about emotion coaching, a kind of a culture or emotion coaching kind of a parenting style, there is also emotion dismissing way. I don't know if you've heard. I have heard parents coming and telling me that today my child is upset because the probably the pet that she had went missing. Okay, so that was a very favorite pet. It was a cat, or it was a kitten, and the kitten is missing. So what did you do? So we didn't want to talk to her about it. Okay, this is what a parent tells me. Okay, so the idea is, if I talk to her about the missing kitten, then I would be churning a lot of negative emotions in her. It would be too much for her to handle, or she'd rather spend time doing her homework than worrying about a pet. It's not really good for children to be sad. It's not good for children to be immersed in a particular emotion. I think they should also learn to deal with it. So just distract their attention. This is a very emotion dismissing kind of a yes, maybe distraction is a good way of coping, but then it's important that children learn to go through an emotional experience, and then as an outcome, if they're able to deal with it and say that yeah, it's part of their experience, and it's incorporated into their entire experience, would be a different thing. But dismissing it in the first go and not really talking about it would mean an emotion dismissing kind of a way of coaching children, which would have negative impact on your children's emotional development. Okay, so yeah, so I would like to stop here and just think. If you could just think quickly as to what are the ways in which you respond to your children's emotions. Now, we saw the child who said no to the food. The child cried. I'm sure some of us would have experienced this. As teachers, as parents, I would want us to just reflect on what are the ways in which we usually respond to our child's emotional displays. Now, think of anger. If you could just take a moment and think of the times when your child has been angry, in the sense, anger, meaning it could be where, the child is really frustrated, very irritable, and, does not cooperate with you, does not follow what you say, or, does not want to comply to what you've said, and is feeling very angry. Okay? I'm sure there have been times. How do you usually respond to that? Just take a moment, I think. Okay. Now, what happens when your child is upset about something? Comes to you and, feels sad, says something like what I said some time back. Maybe, your child is upset about the fact that the friend hasn't spoken to her or him, or maybe, um, maybe experiences of bullying where the child felt that or the child comes and tells you that there was a very negative experience that the child had, and he feels really sad about it. How would you respond to your child?
We may get irritated when they show anger.
Okay. Yeah. What else?
Tell a similar situational story. Be sympathetic when they are upset.
Okay.
We can talk to them as a friend and we can motivate them.
Mhm.
Just listen with complete attention.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I'd
We
like
can
to ask
help.
you a question. Yeah. Yeah, nice. Well,
Yeah, Megha has answered. We can help talk about their problem freely. Dr. Geeta has answered. Ask them to reverse the role, giving a patient ear to the child first, and then including real life situations from our life to teach them a lesson.
okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think in some situations, yeah, in situations where they come to you and talk to you about experiences they've had at school, yes, maybe. But then sometimes in spur of the moment kind of instances, it might not be really easy to uh, talk to them and explain to them, right? Yeah. A quick question: is it easier for us to uh, handle or react to our child's anger or sadness? What do you think? Is anger in your child easier or
Uh,
sadness in your child? Yeah.
Sadness. Renu has answered. Put yourself in the children's shoes. Dr. Geeta has answered sometimes.
Mhm.
Both anger,
Mhm.
sadness is
Yeah.
difficult. Raji
Yes.
R has answered both.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Depends on the cause.
Okay. Yeah. So I think there are a whole lot of factors that contribute to it. I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that I think I'm sure all of you would have thought about it. See, when we talk about these emotional instances, when we talk about handling or dealing with our children's emotional reactions, a lot of it also depends on what state of mind you are in at the moment, right? Uh, Now think of the time when you're going when you're getting ready for work. You've been rushing things through and you've made everything. The breakfast is ready, everything's done, and then we sit at the breakfast table, and then the child says, "I don't want this food," and starts to cry or starts to uh, uh, you know create a scene there and says that, "No, I don't want this," or throws the food. Then how would you react? Vis-a-vis when you have a lot of time and when you're in your free time and your kid comes to you and wants to talk to you about some instance, some experience that they've had. So one, your state of mind, your the particular time at that particular time, what exactly how your mood state is definitely is going to influence. Have we ever thought of? I'm sure some of you would have. Do we use parenting strategies that we are used to, or rather, do we use parenting strategies that our parents have used themselves? I, I, I mean, I feel bad that I can't see your responses. Uh, I'm sure you would have thought about it, right? I'm sure when we were all preparing to be parents, we would have thought about these things. I mean, what kind of a parent am I going to be? Am I going to be like my mom? Am I going to be like my father? Am I going to be different? Any quick
Yeah,
responses?
Dr. Geeta, yes, Dr. Geeta has responded that we have to devise new strategies. Sandhya has responded, I use the way my parents helped me.
Okay.
Libin has answered, our inherited parental strategies in most cases.
Mhm.
Aradita has answered that we evolve our own style of parenting.
Mhm.
Lakshmi Iyer, depends on the situation. Sometimes old fashioned methods work.
Mhm.
Renu has answered helping hand.
Okay.
Mamta
Yeah.
has answered my own way. Not a parent, but I think we often try things or something we never received. Megha has answered. Ramya has answered, wanted to be a mother like you.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. So I'm sure we've had our models, we have had our role models, probably for some positive, some negative models. I'm sure you would agree with me if I say that some of us have really reflected on the ways in which we were parented by our parents, and we have resolved in a particular way to not be like them. I wouldn't want to be parented. I wouldn't want to be the kind of parent that my parents or the way that my parents were to me. I'm sure some of you or some of us would have these experiences. But fortunate are those who would say that, I'd like to use similar techniques because I know my parents have been really supportive, and, what they have done to me has gone a long way in developing me as a person. So I'm going to use those positive aspects. But as some of you have responded, some of us would use a mix of these, right? And I think you would also agree with me if I say that, the times when we grew up is very different from the times that our young kids growing up. Now, that would be the difference of even, even 5 years or 2 years would make a big difference. So I'm sure you agree with that too. In general, when we talk about parenting or helping or nurturing emotionally competent children, or creating an atmosphere where an environment where children can develop and thrive to be emotionally competent individuals. We talk about how attuned you are, to the child, which is a very important aspect. It's a very important capacity. Parental attunement is known to be, a very important factor. Now, despite all the given factors, despite your temperamental differences, despite even even if you have actually been through a very difficult kind of childhood, where you've had parents who have not been really sensitive to your needs, if you are able to reflect on that, if you're able to acknowledge that and reflect on that and create a different narrative for yourself, and use parenting to suit your child's, or to be more sensitive to your child's emotional state, then that's what is called a tuned way of parenting, which is a very important way. So which means, when we're talking about being responsive to our children's emotional capacities, or when we're trying to nurture emotional awareness in our children, it's important that we be aware of our own, emotional states, your own capacity for empathy, along with your understanding of your child's individual difference, I mean individual dimensions or factors. Okay. It's like, in whatever be your child's emotional display, whatever be your child's emotion that the child is experiencing or expressing, it's important that we recognize and we be again attuned to what exactly the child is experiencing, and also try and understand the context, help validate their feelings. It's not important that you have to respond immediately. What happens often is that when we want them to feel better, or we want them to feel good, it does not mean that oh, stop crying, it's okay, you don't have to cry. Sometimes it's important for the child to cry. It's important for the child to cry, experience that emotion, and then maybe we would talk about what are the other ways we could look at it. Or yes, if it's a fact that your pet has gone missing, yeah, so we're not going to have the kitten anymore. So how is it? What does that mean to the child? So how can we look at it? What are the feelings associated with that? So it's important that we validate their feelings, help in ways that would actually help them to find meaning for their emotional experience, which will go a long way, helping them, as I said, even in problem solving, whether be it in an emotional context or a relational context also. So these are some of the so validating and mirroring emotions, which is a very important aspect. I'm not sure if I think you should. We don't have much time, but I would like you all to maybe sometime read this book by Dan Siegel. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the name. He's a person who's into interpersonal neurobiology, who talks about the whole brain approach in dealing with your children. Okay? So it means that you are helping your child develop all aspects, all areas of the brain, and integrate. And in fact, the outcome of such an approach would be an integration that takes place in the child's brain. So it's not just the emotional aspect, but also, combining the logical and emotional aspects together, and creating experiences for children that are validating, that would go a long way in helping them build resilience. It's not just deal with emotions at the moment, but also would help them to create, a set of skills which would prepare them for later challenges in life. So I think there's another term which is called co-regulation. I'm sure you must be familiar with that too. Co-regulation is when we as adults we're able to help children manage their emotions, and which would lead to self-regulation. So it's not self-regulation that we're not looking at children who can deal with their anger right away. We're looking at how we can acknowledge their feelings, how we can actually validate their feelings, help them or model to them ways in which they're able to experience their emotions in safe spaces and be able to regulate these emotions, or manage emotions when it comes. So it's actually, as we said in the beginning, it's a process. It's the outcome of a process, and it's a lifelong process. When you would think of when you look at parenting, I'm sure all of us would agree, we're going to be always dealing with children, at least until the age of 18, 20, 25. I'm sure we are always helping them, helping our children to deal with problems, etc. So it's this co-regulation that would help children manage their emotions.